policy leadership to deal with banditry in the last 2 years? The answer is yes, in a very consequential manner, with great humility, because other than advising on the establishment of the Operation Maliza Uhalifu and the gazettement of the disturbed areas, that's the job now of the minister. Those are policy interventions. But I was able to push through in a very difficult financial situation prevailing then in the country, an injection of a significant amount of resources to acquire equipment to assist the police in their operations, which has been the missing link for many years. MRAPs, that is the mine resistance ambush protected vehicles, armored personnel carriers, drones, that is the aerial vehicles, unmanned aerial vehicles, and so many other, including personal protection items. So, in a very modest way, I would want to be associated with the tremendous work done by the police, with the support of the military, to dismantle the infrastructure of banditry in the North Rift, because I provided policy support for the acquisition of modern weapons and also providing the legal space for the police to carry out operations, especially in the areas which I classified as disturbed and dangerous, because that is where criminals were always retreating and regrouping. Those areas today are completely free from bandits.
The question here, Your Excellency, is on the question of responsibility. Local NGOs, the United Nations, the US government, the foreign missions have admonished the government of the Republic of Kenya over its human rights record, and particularly the handling of a Gen Z protests. My question to you tonight is, when the Republic of Kenya is being admonished, who takes responsibility?
Well, as I have said, you see, the general admonition or viewpoints by various stakeholders on the performance of government on many things, including homeland security, is a legitimate thing. But the question of responsibility arises when one believes that there is something they have done wrong. It doesn't arise when someone's conscience is crystal clear. They have not done anything wrong. From where I sit, the nearly 700 days I served as Kenya's Interior Minister, one, I can account for each of those days what I did for this country, sometimes under great distress and risk, which I knew I'm exposing myself, but because of duty, I had to do it. Some of the places I did, my predecessors never ventured into them. I spent nights in police barracks and military barracks with frontline soldiers, not to command them, but to give them moral support, including on Christmas Day, including on Easter, places like Lamu, where terror attacks were the order of the day, to give them support that the government has not sent these officers there to die. They have sent them there to protect the nation, and as minister, my moral support and the policy guidance I gave, I think, was instrumental in a big way because of the feedback I have received from the officers. So to answer your question, therefore, I see, I am not saying that our homeland security system is perfect. It is work in progress. But responsibility is individual. It's not collective.
I must remind you, Prof, and the viewers, that there's a lot of rain here, so we'll have to speak a bit louder so that we can be heard. But as you speak about policy guidelines and taking modest credit for what was done in the North Rift on banditry, are you trying to tell us that you could not give policy guidelines on how police protests or moral support in them ensuring that they adhere to human rights?
We did.
So what happened? What went wrong?
What went wrong is what goes wrong when maybe, the operations, security operations are intense and emotive operations. It's not somewhere where an officer will be told, when you reach there, do this, do this, do the other. So what we have are general policy guidelines. For example, the use of labor force is reserved when to apply when the life of the officer is at risk.
So was any officer's life in danger? Allow me, Professor Kindiki, was any police officer in danger when David Shege and Enoch Chalo, Erickson Chalo Mutisia only had a flag and they were dancing outside Parliament? What threat did they pose to security officers at Parliament?
That is a matter under investigations. If the circumstances you're reading out there is what happened, the officers will be accountable. It's as simple as that.
And how long will that take?
As soon as IPOA completes the investigations and forwards the files to the DPP. Criminal investigations are complex. They involve scientific assembling of evidence. It is not enough to rush suspects to court only for cases to collapse. And it is not uniquely a Kenyan issue. Criminal investigations, especially in a complex endeavor like the situation we're referring them to, take a bit of time, and therefore I'm hopeful that
how complex was that? That again, who was ensuring security is not breached.
You're just telling me what you think or saw.
But it was
which is part of evidence.
It was on live TV. There are photos of police officers who are masked. I can't identify them.
I'm not disputing.
But
just telling you
that
is part of the evidence that is required to hold into account any person who may have been involved in that unfortunate incident you're explaining.
If you were to move this forward and probably look at why the public is on you, this is what you said on the 12th anniversary of the Supreme Court about a month ago. And you were talking about crucial jurisprudence. You said, I have had to ask myself whether the highest interest is the public interest or there is a higher interest called the national interest, because the public itself could hurt the national interest. Public can be mobilized or mobilized against national interest. First of all, where does this national interest sit in the Constitution? And number two, wasn't this an indirect proposal of a clawback on basic freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution, Your Excellency?
As you answer this, Your Excellency, you did say that lives of protesters need to be protected as you ensure public safety. Was the public unsafe during that period? Why did we get to that point?
When I spoke at the Supreme Court reflection colloquium on public interest and national interest, some erroneously thought I was talking about government interest or even security interest. That's not the case. In fact, after that colloquium, I've had further reflection, because by the grace of God, I'm also a scholar. So I reflect on some of these things. And I have come to the conclusion that within our constitutional framework, we can categorize three forms of interest that could be expressed by members of the public, rather than two, three. One is popular interest. And the question I'm asking myself as a scholar and a student of constitutional law is whether what is popular is in the public interest all the time. I am not sure. I am not sure that what is popular is in the public interest. I don't believe. Sometimes, yes, maybe not all the times. But at the Supreme Court colloquium, I also asked, is there a hierarchy of norms in our Constitution such that we have public interest and national interest? And for clarity and avoidance of doubt. National interest is not government interest, and it's not the interest, or it's not security. What I had in mind is, you're aware, our constitution allows the people of Kenya to express themselves in exercise of their sovereignty in two ways. One, through elections. Two, through referenda. And then I asked myself, in fact, it was tailored to the judiciary, and I wanted to ask myself, if the people of Kenya, for example, agree and express themselves in exercise of their sovereignty to change the constitution in a referendum and vote to remove the judicial arm of government, and they decide we don't need the judiciary. People are sovereign. In a referendum, they can actually remove the judiciary. And then I asked myself, since this is an outcome of a referendum, this is in the public interest. But is it in the national interest that really you can have a modern country, a democratic country without a judicial arm of government?
But these are two different scenarios, DP, because this was about taxes that Kenyans felt were unfair, and their leaders
at the Supreme
Court,
I was not talking about the protest at all. You can look at my statements. I was not talking about protests.
So what do you...
We were reflecting on what the Supreme Court has helped us to understand about our Constitution, and I was inviting the Supreme Court judges to start thinking whether, even as we express our sovereignty, we have what we call bedrock things that we cannot touch. I'll give you another example. If the people of Kenya meet and in a referendum, they overwhelmingly vote, so it is popular, it is in public interest, and they vote to change Article 4.2 of the Constitution that says that Kenya is a democratic multi-party state and creates a monarchy or another form of government that is not democracy. It is in the public interest. It is popular. It's in the popular interest. But is it in the national interest? My answer is that it is not. So within the Constitution, there are things you can change and still not change the DNA of our Constitution. There are others, once you touch them, the DNA of Kenya as we know it changes forever. That's what I was discussing.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, Your Excellency, because during your vetting, following your reappointment as Interior Cabinet Secretary, you are on record saying that you will specify designated protest areas, potentially undermining the right to peaceful assembly outlined in Article 37 of the Constitution. How would you justify limiting spaces where Kenyans can express their grievances at a time when the government is facing mounting criticism, and why?
That is the practice in all democracies. Show me one democracy where people are free to express themselves anywhere, anyhow, anytime, notwithstanding the rights of other people, including traffic, the right for traffic to flow, and so forth. I have been, before I became minister, I was an academic. And for about 12 years, I traveled to about 100 countries around the world. So I'm very familiar with many democracies. Many of them, including the Hague, where I spent almost 7 years in the International Criminal Court trials. They designate places where you go and express yourself. Every institution actually is mandated. If it's parliament, they designate a place, and then the police gives some routine. They say between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., a certain group will protest. And they tell the police will be about 500 and so forth. And then you protest there, you hand your petition, someone comes and receives petitions, then you vacate. Maybe in the evening, another group will come. That's what we might start thinking about. But as long as we think that the expression of right means you and you frustrate everybody else who is not part of your protest, then we are courting anarchy, and that's not part of democracy.
And peaceful protest, because if we go to Chacha, even when you saw the protests regarding the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, they were just roughed off by police. One even wonders, because we even have had leaders who have expressed a fear and concern that actually it's not even Kenyan police. So who are these that appear when Kenyans exercise the democratic freedom of picketing?
The example you have given was regrettable, and government has already addressed itself to that issue. The Principal Secretary for State Department for Internal Security did
Don't you think the precedences are too many?
Not really. I don't think so. And I think with the apology that the State Department gave, I think Kenyans should give government the benefit of doubt. Mm-hmm. Because if the intention was to keep on doing this thing, then an apology was unnecessary. If you know you're going to do it again, you just keep quiet and do it the following day.
Did you realize this only when you became the interior boss? And despite having served in various capacities in the leadership of the Senate, you didn't think of introducing that bill then?
In 2015, I introduced the Homeland Security Bill, which, as leader of majority in the Senate, which was taken up.
Would you tremble?
Part of it is what became the miscellaneous security laws of 2014. I know some parts of that law were struck out, but 85% of those laws are what has made Kenya.
Specifically on limiting the protesters.
The security laws did not cover the issue of protest. But it covered a wide range of issues that we needed to deal with to make sure that our country is safe. But on the other hand, legislation is work in progress. It doesn't end with one piece of legislation. It happens every day. Democracies which have been in place for 300 years are still making law, even security-related laws. So I did my bit in certain aspects, as in the example I've given you, but it is not true that when somebody serves as a member of parliament or Senate, everything that needs to be legislated will be done during that time.
DP, as we wrap this topic up, there's one question that many Kenyans would like to know. In a Citizen TV interview after the protests, you said that infiltrators were linked to elements within government and opposition. And you said we have evidence leading to political operatives from across the political divide. We will prosecute. How far are we with that? How many of those planners or operatives?
Time I checked, I've been following up after that. And you know, that's not too long ago. That was July. After that, as you're aware, the cabinet was dissolved. The entire cabinet. For that period around August, there was no cabinet, July, August, and then